Tonight at 10, a big win for England and a dramatic draw for Wales as they open their campaigns at the World Cup finals.
And it's in. He gets it down to Saka. Looking for Sterling. Saka keeps on going himself. There's the second. There's the next. Playing in Grealish.
Even before kickoff, emotions were high. Many with a clear message about why they were here.
I'm not cheering for Islamic Republic. I'm not cheering for them because they're representing Islamic Republic. I'm here to support my country, my homeland, Iran.
At the moment, the regime, they are killing kids, they are killing children.
I'm not coming over here to support them. We are just coming over here to be voice of people of in Iran. You know, since these protests started, more than 400 people have been killed.
The match itself was disappointing for Iran, but the country's political turmoil could also be felt throughout. There were gestures of defiance, with the slogan of the protests, "Women, Life, Freedom," written on this Iranian flag.
While most Iranian fans cheered relentlessly for their team, some others could be heard chanting "Bisharaf," which means dishonorable, a word used to criticize the security forces. A woman was in the stands with a small poster saying "Women, Life, Freedom," in solidarity with those protesting back in her home country. For many here, this was more than just a football game.
Today, anti-government protests continued, as did the violent crackdown against those taking to the streets. Human rights activists say 400 people were killed and thousands arrested since the protests started in September, triggered by the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. She'd been detained for allegedly not wearing her headscarf properly. Her death became a crying call against the oppression of women. The reverberations of these protests have been felt across the globe, and now they've echoed here, on one of the world's biggest stages. Shaima Khalil, BBC News, Doha.
Turning to today's other match, because the Welsh players are carrying a huge burden of responsibility, backed by this impressive red wall. They're the first, of course, to make the World Cup finals in over 60 years. They struggled to settle and to find form for long periods in the match, but a stunning penalty by Gareth Bale eventually gave them a 1-1 draw against the USA. Our Wales correspondent, Hywel Griffith, is in Doha. Let's join him now for the latest.
Hugh, yes, after all the exhilaration of reaching this first World Cup since 1958, there was always a risk that the Welsh team might be emotionally exhausted before they'd even kicked a ball. And in the first half, let's be blunt, they were poor. They looked out of place. Maybe stage fright took hold. But after a rousing speech from their manager, Rob Page, at half-time and a tactical change, suddenly something started to click. Together, they were stronger in the tackle, faster on the ball, and pulled forward by their captain, Gareth Bale. They simply refused to accept defeat in Doha.
Ready? In die 3!
The wait is over. No more watching from afar, wishing it was Wales. After 64 years and decades of disappointment, these fans are finally at a World Cup. Coming to Qatar has involved huge expense, ethical dilemmas, and an emotional overload.
The feeling is incredible. Within my belly, it's just bubbling.
Could it get any better than this? The atmosphere is amazing. The weather, nice. We're going to do this. We're going to do this.
No matter what the result, it's going to be an amazing experience for me to remember for the rest of my life.
The team spirit and what they do,
They're all mates,
they bring it into the fans, and the fans bring it to them.
Although FIFA promised everyone was welcome here, some fans were told to remove their rainbow hats on the way in. Gareth Bale arrived without his rainbow armband and a threat of a yellow card.
Quite a day, and that's just the start. Let's go to Doha, and our sports editor Dan Rowan who joins us. Dan, let's have your take on what's going on today.
Well, I think, Hugh, as Hal just suggested, perhaps the emotion of this occasion got to Wales in that first half because they were poor. But once again, Gareth Bale, as you just saw, reminding everybody just what a remarkable footballer he is with that late penalty under pressure. He always seems to deliver, doesn't he, when his country needs him most. He is among the superstar elite footballers whose giant images adorn the skyscrapers a short walk from here on the Corniche in Doha, and once again he proved why, handling that immense pressure with aplomb. And of course that draw will give the Welsh confidence that he can now go on and get a result against Iran on Friday, and that would perfectly tee up that blockbuster all-British occasion a week tomorrow against England. And as for Gareth Southgate's side, well, a near to perfect start, their best ever start in fact, at a World Cup finals. Despite recent poor form, they seem to deliver for the manager, don't they, when it comes to major tournaments. I think Bellingham and Saka, these two exciting youngsters, have given England a new dimension. They have really impressive strength in depth as well, and they will now be full of belief that they can go once again far at a major tournament here in Qatar. So performances that both teams, I think, will be ultimately encouraged by. But on the pitch, that was. Off it, they were both frustrated, both climbing down from their plans to wear those One Love anti-discrimination armbands, as Natalie mentioned a few moments ago. Now, FIFA have been trying to keep politics out of football and keep money in, quite frankly, for some time, and their rhetoric has been getting tougher in recent weeks. Today, they played the trump card with that threat of sporting sanctions, and it proved enough. Now, I'm sure it'll have gone down well here in Qatar amid mounting criticism of their hosting of this tournament, but in Europe in particular, human rights campaigners and other groups condemned the move. And I think there was also disappointment that the FA, the FAW and other associations didn't stand up to FIFA and that they capitulated in the manner that they did. FIFA perhaps scoring what they think is a victory here today in terms of that issue around activism, but as those Iran players showed, there's only so much that FIFA can do.
Dan, we'll talk again tomorrow, but thanks very much for now. Dan Rowan there, our sports editor. And for insights into the main issues at the World Cup, you can listen to the Newscast podcast with Adam Fleming and Chris Mason, and they'll be talking about the armbands row, which Dan mentioned there, the fake fans, so-called, and the launching of the Newscast sweepstake. There you go. And you can search for Newscast on BBC Sounds. So let's turn to the day's other main news. An earthquake has struck the main Indonesian island of Java, leaving at least 162 people dead and hundreds injured. That's according to the local governor. Buildings have been destroyed. Rescuers are still trying to find survivors there. The epicentre of the earthquake, which recorded a magnitude of some 5.6, was close to Cianjur town. That's in the west of Java, in an area which is densely populated. It's very vulnerable to landslides. Our correspondent Valdia Baraputri reports now from Cianjur.
As the shaking subsided, shocked residents stood out on the streets of Cianjur to take in the damage done to their homes. It was extensive. By Indonesian standards, this was not an especially powerful earthquake, but it was shallow, close to the Earth's surface, enough to cause hundreds of buildings to collapse as it struck in the afternoon.
When it happened, I was sleeping, but all of a sudden my bed shook and I ran outside. Houses had collapsed.
As officials tried to coordinate rescue efforts for areas which are still cut off, the injured were brought to the area's main hospital by any means possible. Some carried, others in the back of trucks, and in constant chaotic stream of ambulances. With aftershocks still being felt, they were laid down on tarpaulins outside the hospital, with nurses treating them as best as they could.
All of our medical personnel, including those on days off and not on shift, have come on duty.
This hospital is absolutely overflowing with the people injured following the earthquake. Hundreds of people are spending the night being treated here in tents outside of the hospital building. There's a fear, too, of dangerous aftershocks.
Some fear they have lost loved ones.
My two children were playing in the house and I was upstairs getting laundry. I fell on top of this child, but the other one is still missing. My house is flattened to the ground. Two of my children survived. I dug them out myself.
So now, a race to find survivors in shattered neighborhoods without power, without water. Earthquakes are not unusual here, but this one appears to have been more destructive than most, leaving so many villages isolated, so many lives lost, so many homes to rebuild. Valdia Baraputri, BBC News, Cianjur.
Shamima Begum, who was 15 when she travelled to Syria to join the Islamic State group back in 2015, was a victim of human trafficking, according to her lawyers. Ms Begum's case is being presented to a UK immigration tribunal, where her legal team is asking for her British citizenship to be restored. The government says that she still poses a security threat. Our Home Affairs correspondent, Daniel Sanford, is with me here in the studio. Tell us more about the case that her lawyers are making.
Well, Hugh, first of all, the setting. SIAC, where the case is being heard, is one of the UK's highest security courts, a basement courtroom, with today the MI5 officer giving evidence from behind a thick curtain. And no Shamima Begum, of course. She's still in a tented camp in northern Syria. But her lawyers were there to argue that rather than being treated as a national security risk, she should instead be being treated as a child victim of trafficking for sexual exploitation. Because although she and her two school friends did travel to Turkey on their own, they were then smuggled into Islamic State-controlled Syria, and very soon after she arrived, Shamima Begum, still an impressionable 15-year-old, was married to an adult Islamic State fighter. She was pregnant soon afterwards. And they're saying that Sajid Javid, who was then Home Secretary, was far too quick to strip her of her citizenship in 2019 as the Islamic State group collapsed, its caliphate collapsed. The Home Office lawyers said in contrast that actually this isn't about trafficking. This is about trying to keep people in the UK safe from former IS supporters. And the MI5 officer giving evidence from behind that curtain said Shamima Begum knew exactly what she was doing when she went to Syria, and also that victims can very much be threats as well.
OK, Daniel, many thanks for the latest there on the Immigration Tribunal. Daniel Sanford, our Home Affairs correspondent. Now, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has tried to end speculation that he might want to renegotiate the Brexit deal to secure closer links, trade links, that is, with the EU. Well, some Conservative MPs have reacted with anger to reports in the Sunday Times newspaper that some ministers and officials wanted the deal to be looked at again to give the UK economy a boost. Business leaders have been asking the government to allow more immigration to tackle a serious shortage of workers in some sectors. But Mr Sunak, a keen supporter of Brexit, has apparently rejected that. So our business editor, Simon Jack, has more details for us.
This 200-year-old family business in Dudley makes roof tiles using 9 energy-hungry kilns. Add that to rising wages and customers feeling the same pressure, and the outlook is tough.
I think when we project forward, we are very worried. The environment that we are selling into is going to become more challenging. If we've got to put our prices up to reflect all the cost pressures that we're facing, there comes a point where people just can't afford to buy your products.
30 miles away, the Prime Minister told business he'd stabilise the economy and was optimistic about the future.
Our most pressing task when it comes to growth is stability and controlling inflation. But that will never be the limit of our ambition. The more we innovate, the more we will grow.
But business leaders are increasingly talking of a need to review post-Brexit immigration and trade policy. But today, the Prime Minister squashed any notion of a rethink.
Under my leadership, the United Kingdom will not pursue any relationship with Europe that relies on alignment with EU laws. Now, I voted for Brexit, I believe in Brexit, and I know that Brexit can deliver, and is already delivering, enormous benefits and opportunities for the country.
You can't move around here without seeing or hearing the word growth. And the Prime Minister came today to talk about innovation, driving the growth in the jobs and the industries of the future. But for most people here, they have much more pressing concerns. High energy bills, of course, there's a chronic labour shortage and a big dip in trade with the EU. And it's that short-term growth that many feel isn't getting enough attention.
The question is, how on earth do we grow? And that's why you're starting to see people explore things like immigration or regulation or planning reform or even our relationship with Europe, because we need other ways to get growing when we can't just rely on tax cuts and low interest rates.
Bosses also said big decisions would hinge on how much help they got with energy bills when current support expires in April.
How much recruitment we can do, how much longer term investment we can do,
our profitability targets. Everything for our business is really key around the energy costs.
On that, the Prime Minister said wait and see. In all, there are still more questions than answers for businesses already under strain and nervous about the future. Simon Jack, BBC News, Birmingham.
NHS leaders in Scotland, who are dealing with extreme pressures on parts of the service, have discussed moving towards, in effect, a two-tier system where wealthy patients could pay for some treatment. They also discussed the possibility of limiting the policy of free prescriptions. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said that reform was needed, but she then went on to rule out charging people for accessing care or removing the founding principles of the NHS. The health service in Scotland is struggling to deal with long waiting lists and staff vacancies. Our Scotland editor James Cook has the story.
The National Health Service is struggling in Scotland and across the UK. And now we have a glimpse into top-level discussions about how to respond, with senior NHS leaders apparently given the green light to consider reform. The most controversial idea noted in the minutes is designing a two-tier system, where those who can afford to go private. Other suggestions include cutting back on state-funded prescriptions and sending patients home from hospital earlier, even if that means they're at greater risk. But the First Minister says any talk of privatising the NHS is nonsense.
I will be absolutely crystal clear as the democratically elected First Minister of the country that the founding principles of our National Health Service, that it is a universal service, free at the point of use, publicly funded, publicly delivered for all. These principles are not up for debate.
But do NHS bosses here have confidence in ministers, and especially in the Health Secretary Humza Yousaf visiting this hospital in Fife today? The minutes of the meeting also highlight concern that some Scottish Government suggestions are divorced from reality because of an absence of clinical input. And they talk about a disconnect between the pressure felt by clinicians on the one hand and the message from ministers on the other. And this health expert says it's not just the NHS in Scotland which is struggling.
All across the UK, I think the NHS is under really visible strain at the moment. You know, difficulties in accessing care, difficulties with finance, difficulty in attracting staff and giving them good enough terms and conditions that they stay. I think these conversations were in Scotland, I don't know the details, but people are thinking more about radical options.
And no wonder, because the summary of the discussions of NHS leaders concludes the fundamental model of healthcare is not working for us. James Cook, BBC News, Glasgow.
Well, let's have a few minutes then of returning to our main story and the day's football in Qatar. A nerve-wracking time for Welsh fans who were relieved, to say the least, with a draw against the USA, and a positively jubilant time for England supporters. In a moment, we'll be hearing from Thomas Morgan in Cardiff. But first, Dan Johnson with some of the England fans in Manchester.
This is a fan park, Manchester style. A warehouse.
Oh, let's go!
Jumping to a steady beat of England goals. This city wears national pride alongside respect for equality. The sort of issue under question in Qatar.
I must admit, it was a bit of a slow build-up for me. I didn't know what to expect. But coming here today and winning 3-0 now has really pumped me up.
You're feeling it now?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm really feeling it.
Support England 100%, so I'm here, but yeah, it's soured it a lot. And the fact that it's winter, it doesn't feel right anyway.
FIFA aren't as inclusive as they make out to be, and
I think they should be wearing the armband.
I do think they should be wearing the armbands, yeah, definitely.
Qatar certainly wouldn't approve of this. It wasn't full here today, but the hope is now football takes centre stage and interest grows.
6 England goals, that's really built the atmosphere here. So after the initial lack of enthusiasm for this World Cup, it could now be that a different tone takes over this tournament.
I think you just got to get involved now and get on with it. We're in it to win it, so yeah, let's go on board with our country and see if we can go all the way with it.
Next up is the United States on Friday night. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Manchester.
In true Welsh spirit, 1,500 fans in song. A sea of bucket hats, so synonymous with the red wall, all ready for the first game in a generation. The excitement for this moment evident.
We're not here to make up the numbers, we're here to make history, make a moment and make something special out of what we've got the opportunity for.
Massive achievement for Wales, and just look at us tonight. It's filling up. It's going to be a hell of a night if we get there.
That excitement quickly turned to anxiety as the US dominated and scored.
Well, even though it's 1-0 down at half-time, there's still a party atmosphere in Cardiff. The fans making the most of this opportunity.
After the stoppage in play for some extra hydration, the main man goes down in the box. And with nerves on the edge, elation for the fans and some salvation.
Well, as the old cliche goes, football is a game of two halves. Wales' superstar Gareth Bale to the rescue once again. But in fairness, the support and optimism from the fans here in Cardiff didn't wane one bit.
We'll take a draw against England, go through the group, and then that's it.
And then win the World Cup.
It didn't get any worse than what we started off. And a point at the end of the day, if you asked me a point before this game, I would have taken it.
Bailed out, they'll take a 1-0 here. Thomas Morgan, BBC News, Cardiff.
Well, as you can imagine, I was very calm all evening. Of course I was. The time is 10:30 and Chris is with me, very calm as ever, with the weather. Hey, Chris.
Holding it together well, Hugh. Yeah. Today, well, we've seen lots of heavy rain around, particularly across England and Wales. Skies like these have been pretty commonplace, with the rain causing a bit of localised flooding actually on some of our A roads across southern regions. Rain-wise, well, we had about 31 millimetres. That was the wettest spot, Loch Fay, which is in Northern Ireland. Quite wet, though, parts of southern England and across the south of Wales as well. This is the area of low pressure that brought the rain. It's not really moving very far, very fast, because it's running in against this area of high pressure. There's bridging all the way across from Greenland to the north of Europe. And that's really stopping it progressing. So this area of low pressure is just going to sit there overnight. Still, we've got more rain in the forecast, but the rain will turn a little bit lighter and patchier. Now, for most of us, it is a frost-free night. We're already down to -3 in the Highlands of Scotland. So here, yes, some local frost and a few fog patches around as well. Now, tomorrow morning, we start off on a damp note. Eastern Scotland, eastern areas of England. The rain tends to ease to showers as we go through the day. Western areas actually not a bad day with some sunshine around, but some showers just clipping Pembrokeshire, running into parts of Cornwall and Devon, where it's going to be a fairly windy day. Temperatures 7 to 11 degrees Celsius. For many, these temperatures are just a degree or two below average for the time of year. More rain in the forecast for Wednesday, another area of low pressure on the way. This one brings a band of heavy rain, which pushes its way northwards and eastwards. And then through the afternoon, it brightens up in the west, a mixture of sunshine and showers. But the showers really widespread, some of them probably quite heavy and thundery as well. Temperatures not changing too much, around 7 to 12 degrees Celsius. But over the next few days, although the weather is going to stay very unsettled, expect more rain. The winds are going to switch to a southwesterly direction, so temperatures on the rise a little bit, highs up to around 13 or 14 degrees as we head into the weekend. More rain on the way, Hugh.
Chris, many thanks. Chris, there with the latest on the weather. And that is BBC News at 10 on a rather eventful 21st of November. More analysis, of course, of the day's main stories coming up, well, right now on Newsnight. That's with Victoria Derbyshire standing by there on BBC Two. Here on BBC One, of course, as you know, colleagues in the nations and regions ready with the news where you are. But from the 10 team, thanks for watching and good night.